Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashmita Sanyal, and I'm part of the corporate HR team at Infosys. I also work with NHRD Bangalore as a member of their Young Advisory Board. And it is my esteemed honor to welcome you all today to this special Women's Day webinar. In the week of International Women's Day, we, as NHRD Bangalore, are celebrating the strength and resilience of women. A little about NHRD. NHRD Bangalore is a non-profit organization committed to development of HR professionals and to drive functional brilliance and thought leadership. Now, while we all realize the importance and significance of women in workplace, why is it then that the percentage of women at the top leadership isn't increasing? Gender diversity is a business imperative for any organization looking to thrive in today's ever-changing business environment. We know that for decades, women have fueled the growth of our economy. Why is it then that women account only for 17% of the executive positions in India? And how can we, as HR professionals, drive successful development strategies to help women reach their true potential at work? To dive a little deeper into this, we have with us today stalwarts of gender diversity from Accenture, Coca-Cola, and Infosys, who will share some best practices that they have implemented in their organizations and the impact that these have had in building a more inclusive workforce. We will have the webinar for the first 45 minutes. This will be followed by a question answers for 15 minutes. I'll request you to please post your questions in the chat window for the organizer only. Our first speaker this evening is Ms. Dhanya Rajeshwaran, Director, Talent Strategy, Human Capital and Diversity at Accenture. In a career spanning for more than 17 years, she has held HR leadership roles across businesses. In her current role, she is focused on enabling talent strategies for India, which is Accenture's largest geography. Dhanya is deeply passionate about building an inclusive workforce. She is also the convener for Vahini, Accenture Women's Network in India, which has 1 lakh plus members, both internal and external. Over to you, Dhanya.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to try and pull up my screen. Okay, let me see. Okay, my webcam is on. Okay, tell me once my screen is up, please. Is my screen up?
Yes, Dhanya.
Okay, excellent. All right. Hi everyone, and Ashmita, thank you so much for such a warm welcome. It's really cool that NHRD is doing such an event in this format. It allows for all of us to engage in a little bit more technology-driven way. So thank you for this. I know I have 15 minutes, which is not much when it comes to telling our story about how we've gone through the journey of inclusion at Accenture. Ashmita gave you a little bit of a background about myself, but one thing that I believe I need to add to this is, while I've been at Accenture for the last 13 years, my association with the topic of inclusion is almost 10 years in various capacities as an HR person through my different roles. But I think it's beautiful for me to just see how much and how deep the culture of inclusion has gone into Accenture, largely driven by the vision that our very top leaders have had towards why this is so critical to us, right? So I'm going to tell you the story, and when we talk about inclusion, we usually take the widest possible lens. So I know that we're going to dive into women and women programs, but you will also have to allow me the opportunity to tell you how we view inclusion diversity at Accenture from the broadest lens, right? One of the biggest milestones that we've actually had for ourselves is we've gone ahead and said that it's one thing for us to believe that diversity makes us smarter, diversity makes us more innovative, and diversity makes us better, gives us better ability to serve our clients, and of course makes the world a better place. But I think what our leaders realized is that if that is not backed up by some very solid commitments on the ground, then we're not going to be able to see that progress. So what started off in 2015 as what we would call as our Talent Ambition 2020, which is Accenture's vision for how we want to be seen as a talent-led organization. One of the 6 ambitions was actually to be the most inclusive and diverse organization in the world, and that was then articulated as very hard goals for us. And 2 goals actually stands out. In a point in time when there was enough research and external thought leadership that said that it's going to take us decades to get to an equal workplace. Our CEO and our CHRO, Pierre Nantam and Ellen Shook, actually said, we're going to aspire to become a 50% gender mix by the year 2025. An extremely aggressive goal, I must say. And they didn't stop just with that. They said, okay, it's one thing for us to have a gender balanced workforce across the patch, but we also recognize that women in leadership is an equally critical space for an organization to address. And a more nearer term goal that we took for ourselves is that by the year 2020, which is just 2 years away, we've committed that we will be 25% managing directors across the world who are women. So, such a strong goal actually guides what we do, how we measure ourselves, the programs we drive, the culture that we want to have within the workplace. And what you see on the right-hand side is just a little bit of a highlight on some of the key things that we have. So I started off by saying that we take the widest possible lens to inclusion diversity. It means that for us, it's not just about gender diversity, it's much broader. It's about how inclusive we are about sexual orientation, people with disabilities, race, ethnicity, the cultural backgrounds people represent, and for that matter, any background. Like you could be a parent, you could come from a different strata in the society, any sort of a difference that anyone represents is actually a very valuable part of who we are at Accenture, and actually allows for us to become that much more diverse in our thinking and in our solutions that we come up with. So that's really the background to what our goals are and how we sort of view diversity. And when you think about it, to say, okay, how does that translate on the ground, right? So I just put together a few things on the left-hand side for you to just give you a sense of how we drive inclusion and diversity. So I spoke to you about the talent ambition. Now, the goals need to be backed up with a very strong governance, right? So at Accenture, we actually have a triology. So we have a business owner, we have an HR owner, and we have dedicated I&D specialists who sort of work hand in hand to provide the governance that is required. And this governance goes down to every load of leadership. So, at a DU level, at a deal level, at a location level, I mean, whatever slice and dice that you might have of a leadership node, the governance extends to that. And the governance is also supported ably by 3 things. One, our ability to look at data with an insight-driven lens, right? So, you might have heard about the maternity leave policy that Accenture launched, say 3 years ago, which was at that point in time market leading when it came to a 6-month maternity leave policy, right? That was driven by hard data analytics, which allowed us to see that if our women were dropping off the workforce, and women do when it comes to their own personal life journeys that they go through as a married woman, as a mother, or with their caregiving responsibilities, the drop-off tends to happen. And our analytics actually allowed us to pinpoint to say, for a mother, how much time would she ideally need to come back to work, right? And that insight allowed us to create a very solid business case to say the maternity leave policy need to change, right? And when that happened, obviously it had some very tangible results in the quantum of attrition. So we've more than quartered the attrition rate of our returning mothers. And the second part of it is when you think about employee involvement, right? The strength of any organization comes from its ability to capture the voice of its employees and convert it into a meaningful policy program, something that impacts their day-to-day lives. So the employee involvement for us gets driven through our employee networks, the focus groups that we run, the constant engagement that we have with our people. And you must remember that Accenture is about 150,000 plus people in India. And to be able to drive such a large organization with the voice of an employee needs its own set of innovation. And probably that's a story to tell for another day. But needless to say that when you think about innovation and insight, it can only come from how involved your employees are in your policy making. And the last part of it is, of course, how you're enabling the governance with measurement, with accountabilities, with their priorities tied closely to how they are measured on their performance, and so on and so forth. Right? So with that being said on how the impact is delivered, I'm going to spend the rest of my, I'm just doing a quick time check on this, so the rest of my possibly 5 minutes to talk to you about a selection of women programs, and then very, very quickly run you through what we do for segments outside of women. So again, what you see on the right-hand side, I will let you ask me questions on any one of these, but a couple that I want to highlight is when you think about policies, policies alone don't solve everything, right? Just because you have a 6 months maternity policy doesn't cut it. You needed to make sure that you have a full-fledged program. So when you think mothers, you're talking about right from the time that they go on their maternity leave to the time that they come back, how they on-ramp, and how are we helping them get back to their successful careers that they were possibly left when they took their maternity break. So through this point, we have a program called Returning Mothers Program, which essentially means that there is a maternity coach who gets assigned to the mother who's preparing for her maternity. And this coach stays engaged with the mother right through her pregnancy, through her motherhood, and then when she's ready to come back as a new mother, then the coach also plays a role in on-ramping. So how we are staffing and measuring ourselves with our ability to staff returning mothers. Right. The other part of it is, we hear a lot about how technology and women in technology is such a hot topic, right? So for us, it was about making sure that not only are women growing their careers in hardcore technology, because sometimes you do tend to see people take, project management roles, program management roles, non-chargeable roles, as we would call it in our industry, but that may not necessarily help them stay as technologists. So this high-tech women program that we have is focused towards building about 1,000 women technical architects with a series of certifications, and how we actually help them stay the course with their technical careers. And one other important thing that I want to highlight over here is, we spoke about maternity, but maternity traditionally viewed through the lens of a biological mother. But what about adoptive parents? What about surrogate parents, right? And this is where the voice of our employees actually helped us realize that, we shouldn't be discriminating within the process of how somebody becomes a parent, and a parent needs to be valued as such. So we actually changed our policies to say maternity is equal to adoption, is equal to surrogacy, and therefore is open to both genders for the same quantum of time. And trust me when I say this, the amount of joy that our men and women felt at Accenture when we actually changed this part of our policy is phenomenal, because in many ways it also said that we are very supportive of an of a workplace which is inclusive of gender identity and sexual orientation as well, right? The last point I want to make on this slide is, you see this point over here about intentionality of careers, right? Many times, and you would have noticed this as HR professionals yourself, is that the way sometimes women view their careers versus the way a man views their career is usually different, right? And I'll give you an example. So, if a man and a woman are graduating from the same college, the girl in all probability coming from where she is, from whichever part of India that she is probably thinking, I'm going to work for the next couple of years, then figure out where my married life takes me, then probably work for another couple of years, then take where my parent journey takes me, and then figure out what I want to do for my career. Versus a man who's very clear, irrespective of his marriage, irrespective of his parenthood, he knows what he wants to be in his career, right? Now, I'm not generalizing to say that women in general don't have this clarity. Women have the clarity, but I think the way they approach their careers, there is a subtle difference. And this program of intentionality of careers was aimed at helping our young women who were joining our workforce to say, think of your career as a longer term. Don't look at, marriage, childcare, and all of that as roadblocks, but rather as a very integrated view to how you'll navigate your careers. And the moment they think like that, then the way they build their relationships at work, long-term mentors, stronger support systems with the family, better relationships with the mother-in-law, right? I mean, people who are very well positioned to help her become successful as a woman, both in her personal and professional careers. And I think that program, and today we have about 7,000 of our women who've participated in it. And again, measuring impact, when we look at the attrition rate of this group, significantly lower and different from the rest of the workplace. So I think the point I'd like to leave this group with is, when you think about crafting your overall diversity journey, right? Point one, don't think of it just as gender, think of it as inclusion, right? Inclusion beyond gender, because an inclusive workplace is embracive of everybody. The second part of it is, when you start thinking about inclusion, you open your mind to look at what is it that your employees really want? What are they trying to tell you? And how are you going to hear their voice and convert it into data, into a business case, and then create it into a policy which eventually benefits them, right? So that's the second part. And the third part is, how are you constantly pushing yourself to measurement, to making sure that there is focus on, whether or not the dial is shifting. And of course, when you think about the whole workplace, right? How do you put the onus back on every single person? How do you make sure that it's not just an organization-driven effort, but something that everyone in your organization cares for? So, what we're doing right now is, we're actually talking about the whole philosophy that inclusion starts with I, right? Each one of us have a role. Each one of us have to make a personal commitment. And when we start doing that, then the workplace changes, the society changes. I'd have loved to share this video with you, but maybe later at a different time. But that's really what I had to say. I know I went over a couple of minutes from my 15, but Ashmita, back to you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It was really heartening to hear of so many wonderful programs. We will now hear from Ms. Seema Nair, Executive Director, Human Resources at Coca-Cola. Seema, thanks for joining us this evening. Seema joined Coca-Cola in January 2017 as Executive Director, Human Resources, and she leads the people function for the region. She is known to have a strong positive influence in a variety of business leadership and people forums. Seema, if you could talk to us a little about some of the practices at Coca-Cola, and maybe one that has had the biggest impact in building a more inclusive workforce. Seema, Seema, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks, Ashmita, for inviting me to this webinar, and Tanya for that opening. Obviously, Accenture is a large organization, and it looks like there's a huge amount of great work being done, which I think all of us can learn and benefit from. Now, HCB, on the other hand, is a very, very different organization, very diverse organization by itself, right? I guess to both my predecessor as well as successors, as far as this panel is concerned. We come from the FMCG industry. What HCCB does, or Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages does, is largely sales, distribution, manufacturing, and supply chain for the range beverages that Coca-Cola produces and sells within the country. And in terms of size and scale, we are amongst the top 5. Some would say the top 4, but I guess we're okay with the top 5. FMCG being the top 5 FMCG by way of net revenue within the country. In terms of our types of talent, while the in-house workforce is about 8,000 on, what we also have extreme influence over is our contingent workforce, which is a variety of contract workforce, which supports both our manufacturing operations as well as our front-end selling as well as distribution operations. And unlike other places at HCCB, that's kind of the front line of our business. And so from an HR standpoint, right, it's a very important workforce that we also end up paying a lot of attention to in terms of their talent as well as their people needs and diversity needs and so on, right? Now, coming to a little bit of the diversity journey so far as HCCB is concerned, it's fairly nascent, very, very young. In fact, we hired our first specialist diversity and inclusion officer just a little over a year ago, actually closer to 15 months ago now, in January of 2017. And in this period of time, right, we've covered a fair amount of strides. Now, FMCG in general in India is a very, very difficult place for, people from a different gender to operate, and also for, a range of inclusive work to be done. Because the work culture is, relatively speaking, right, a little bit away from what one kind of expects to see in the high-tech or in a more Western kind of MNC-oriented culture, right? In fact, even at this point of time, when we take a look at our gender diverse workforce, we're at about 8.2 when we take into account our staff as well as managerial population. If we take into account our blue-collar workforce population, right, the gender diversity drops actually to even lower single digits. Now, in the face of all of that, there are a few things that we have done which are pretty interesting. There's actually a 3-year roadmap that's been put together called IKEA that charters all the different forms of diversity inclusion. So obviously one of the big focus areas is gender, but it goes on to extend whether it's disabilities, whether it's LGBT populations, what are we going to be doing in support of those. But even more importantly, right, when it comes to diversity of thought, when it comes to diversity of backgrounds of people, whether it's somebody with an urban background versus a rural background, whether it's somebody who's been in a very elite set of schools and colleges versus someone who might have had, almost no school or college, right, what's the name to their reputation and so on and so forth, right? So how do we make our managers, how do we make our teams understand that diversity comes in all forms, right, that are visible as well as invisible, but it's extremely rich, right, in terms of, even when you think about the products that we sell, right, I mean, it's the diversity that basically adds to the richness in our business that our consumers also want. And so how does that play out, right? Now, a few things that I'd like to actually highlight. So while I mentioned that our gender diversity ratios at this point of time are extremely low, at the senior most level of the organization, we're already at 30% diversity. So the top leadership team, right, comprises of about 9 people, out of which 3 are women. So that includes our CEO, by the way. And so we're achieved 33% diversity out there already. So it's largely more lower down in the ranks that we're looking to continue to augment our talent pool. Now, obviously, a lot of that focus continues to be on the hiring engine and how do we ensure that we take a look at qualified women, both from a sales and marketing perspective as well as from a supply chain perspective, which is a big part of our business. We find a lot of women, and unfortunately, that's probably true not just in India but across the whole world. There are a lot of women available in functions such as finance, HR, sometimes IT, or at least some parts of IT, and what one can call the fingertips, right? But a few women taking on roles in more front-end roles. So just as Manya talked about, on the technology or architecture side of the house, right, where you're having a very specific focus. I think for us, all of that focus shifts when we are talking about on the supply chain vertical, right, or in the sales and marketing vertical. In fact, when we take a look at hiring from the outside, right, I mean, some of my headhunters tell me that across the entire FMCG, you're not likely to find as many qualified women, even to kind of form an initial diverse candidate pool, right, for hiring. So you don't have a choice, but to either then say, okay, then I'm going to expand the pool, not just to look at FMCG, but I'm also going to look at maybe some allied industries, right? It could be telecom, it could be finance, it could be from the IT industry on one hand. And on the other hand, I'm probably going to start, maybe not at the leadership level, but at least at the mid-management level, and then help them grow through the ranks. So once again, from a learning standpoint, there's a whole slew of programs, which is all around women in leadership. But we don't necessarily try and keep, well, there are some programs cater to our women's population and extremely well received. But at the same time, the intention is always to have them go through the widest range of leadership programs that's available, because at the end of the day, leadership is not necessarily about gender, but it's about continuing to build capabilities, continuing to build visibility, continuing to build a value and a brand for yourself, right? So we encourage them to go through the widest set of options that we have available. One unique thing that we have done, and in fact, this rollout is going to happen actually this month, is around having a much more gender neutral factory. And it's actually going to go live this month in the city of Sanand, which is on the outskirts of Ahmedabad, about an hour from Ahmedabad. So if any of you wish to travel, see how gender diverse or almost gender neutral factory operates, very, very happy to visit. So 40% of the workforce, all the way from operators at blue collars to staff to managers, right, up to the factory manager, 40% of the workforce is female. It's also our first smart factory in India. So the size and scale of production in other parts of India, we probably have a headcount of 600 to 800 versus this factory with the amount of investment that's being done in terms of technology, in terms of multi-skilling and so on and so forth. The entire factory runs with a headcount of about 100, right, which has significant implications for us in terms of productivity of. So it remains to be seen how this factory operates in terms of continued retention, productivity, and which basically means then we can start replicating the same model, right, across other parts of our supply chain engine across India. So that's one initiative that we're extremely proud of at this point of time, and it required a fair amount of countering apprehensions, perceptions, misogyny, right, around what is the nature of work that women can do, right, especially in a factory shop floor kind of an environment. We've seen other places, by the way, where we've seen very, very encouraging signs. So some of our quality specialists, for example, being trained to do multi-skilling and to end up becoming line operators. In fact, some of them now running entire lines in some of our other factories, which slowly then encourages other women, to take up those kinds of roles and so on and so forth, right? That's so far as our supply chain talent pool is concerned. The other thing that I'd like to actually make a mention of, and then up on time, is also around the fact that when we take a look at our people manager capability, right, and other kinds of leadership programs, the attempt is to try and ensure that we have adequate and more of a pool of women that end up undergoing those different programs. Once again, when we take a look at bench or succession, when we take a look at our talent pipeline overall, right, how do you ensure that the mix is adequate and that there's adequate support that's been provided, right, sometimes probably more than what is required to make sure that, those populations, right, end up continuing to move up the leadership ranks and roles, and eventually end up, right, in those significantly enhanced leadership positions. Also, the belief is that, and I think there's enough research and data that backs this up, the more leaders you have, and if you're able to influence at that level, right, chances are it's easier to have the trickle-down effect. Now, I know there are many companies that kind of work at the bottom, starting off with campus and trying to retain people over the next several years as they go through different life missions, and that's an important, obviously, methodology and a pretty valuable methodology. But it's also important to see where can you insert at the very top, and use that as an umbrella, right, to kind of help the rest of the organization pull through the same. So I think both methods are extremely valid, and we're operating, with both of those methods. In terms of the numbers, I think in our case we have a long journey to go. But I think with all of these insertions, right, we're expecting to make pretty rapid strides. Happy to come back to you and report out on what did we learn in terms of lessons back from Sanand, and once again, then what is the retrofit method, right, that we have for the rest of the factory pool and talent that we have. So that's about it from my side, and happy to take questions towards the end.
Thank you, Seema. We will have some questions for you. But before that, I'd like to welcome Ms. NHRDN, Vice President, Human Resources at Infosys. Shamishta, one of the most common problems that we see, and particularly in the IT industry, is that gender diversity is quite high at an entry or even at a mid-management level. But leadership level shows very poor number of women when compared to men. In fact, as per a NASSCOM report of last year, we see that only 7% of women have actually reached CXO positions. How do you think we can help bring back these ladies?
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon. Thank you, Ashmita. Thank you, NHRD, for this opportunity to learn and share on this very important topic. Let me take a few minutes of what I want to present, and maybe I'll come back to that later, Ashmita. Thanks, Dhanya and Seema. Listening to you, it only makes me realize how much more there is to do, and in every organization around women empowerment. Similar to Accenture, actually we at Infosys also took a bold step right at the beginning a few years back about cementing our intent by committing publicly our goals on diversity. And of course, the goals were around an inclusive organization. So it was not just about gender diversity, but today I'll restrict myself to gender diversity purely. We also made the goals part of our scorecard, and we involved business right from the beginning to lead the diversity councils to drive this goal. Now, we adopted a strategy which has a very sharp focus on specific dimensions of gender diversity. The problems are so huge. They are often not within the realms of the organization. They are related to the society, our upbringing, and so many things. So really, finding solutions to every problem would be a humongous task. So we decided to start small, and our focus very firmly is on improving our diversity at leadership levels. And today I want to talk to you about two specific practices that we are, two specific tracks that we are really following on improving diversity in our leadership levels. Seema, unlike you in Coca-Cola, we don't have the problem of attracting women at entry level. At entry level, like any knowledge industry, we almost have a 50-50 hiring ratio of men and women. Our problem starts a couple of years down. As we go up the career ladder, we see that women start dropping off. And by the time we reach the leadership levels, our numbers are not at all worth talking about. They're really low. So promoting and hiring women into leadership definitely is a key focus. As HR, one of the things that we drive is talent reviews. So from middle management level itself, we have unit leaders sit down with their direct reports and business HR and chalk out the career plan for all middle managers and above, and that includes, of course, women. What it does is sometimes women who are not very visible, whose work is not highly showcased, who do not network too well, these people tend to fall off the attention span. The talent review ensures that we consider all of them, and during promotion cycle, it becomes an easy decision as to whom to promote, whom to not, and we know why these people are not getting promoted and what we need to do to take them to the next level. We are also setting targets for our senior most leaders to have women as direct reports. We believe that this creates a virtuous cycle where from top to bottom we will have more and more women at every level. I want to spend a couple of minutes on this Women in Technology program that we have. I think Dhanya alluded to it earlier on. It is very easy in our knowledge industry, especially, to see women in business enabling functions at leadership level. However, when you look at core delivery, core technology, at leadership level, we do not find enough women. So we have initiated this program, which consists of a set of interventions to develop and mentor identified high potential, high performing women. The focus is to look at some very specific skills, which in my last 20 years of experience, I have seen sometimes lacking in women. And those are about broadening your own exposure, showcasing your own talent, and enhancing network. This last point continues to bother me, that high performing, high potential women do not create enough network within the organization, and as a result they are unable to showcase their talent, and they are not getting those opportunities which take them to the next level. So this program of Women in Technology actually tries to do that. It tries to give exposure, it tries to showcase the talent and improve the network of women. The program was designed after multiple design thinking sessions with various stakeholders, and the workshops, etc. The program is well underway now. I can talk about some of the typical jobs maybe later on during the Q&A session. The other part is about creating women in core technology and not just leading the revenue streams. We are proud that we have many women who are leading the technical stream of our business units. We have a program, I think again in Accenture, there is a similar program, but we do have around 400, 500 women in the last 1 year who are enrolled in this Aspiring Architect program, and whose dream and aspiration is to become leaders in technology. While it is nice to say that we want to promote and hire into leadership, we need the pipeline, to promote women internally to higher positions. And when we ran our analytics and our reports, we realized that we lose women at certain critical stages. And we targeted one such stage, which is around childbirth. Our Return to Work program is really a platform that brings various resources of the organization under one umbrella to provide that little bit of extra support to women when they come back from maternity leave, so that they can quickly get back into mainstream. And it starts with hygiene factors like having flexible policies. So we have one of the best work from home policies, extended leaves beyond maternity leave, part-time, sabbatical, and so on. But I think our main idea is to create a purposeful engagement in office when a woman comes back from maternity leave. We have to acknowledge that there is a very big purpose at home. A woman needs to stay back. She feels that she needs to stay back. If we have to compete with that purpose, then we have to ensure that when she comes back from maternity leave, we give her a worthwhile assignment, and she is not, as we call in our industry, on bench or not doing a value-added work for the client. And our HR team works to create those kind of projects, identifies projects, and builds in little bit of flexibility into those, so that if there is a workplace flexibility, if there is a time related flexibility that is needed, those are incorporated. We measure ourselves on those metrics as to how soon a woman joins back into production projects after returning from maternity leave, how long they remain with us after childbirth, and these are some of these we also report externally. The Sapphire app, I think it is a much, it has won accolades for us externally and internally. It's a delightful platform which enables women to stay connected, stay engaged, and stay inspired during the maternity leave period. Being a very long period, when they come back to the organization, sometimes they can feel very alienated. Things would have changed in 6 months, 9 months, or even a year. So this digital platform allows them to remain in touch with the projects, allows them to learn new skills if they so want, get information about the organization and what is the latest on strategy, technology, and so on, so that once they come back, they really feel that they are coming back to home. Ashmita, that's all that I wanted to talk about in terms of best practices and what we are doing to take women to the leadership level. I can take questions if need be.
Thank you very much, Anushka. We are now open for questions. Please post your questions in the question window. You can send them to the organizer and I will take them up. We'll start with you, Shanushka. You spoke about mothers returning back from after a childbirth. This question is from Suchitra Srikumaran, and she wants to know that if you think that the long leave that women take, during maternity leave, does that affect her career growth?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting question. I myself,
we can't hear you.
you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
It's a very interesting question, and I often struggle with that. That should is a long leave conducive to a career or it is not? But I think at the end of it, it's a choice, and as an organization, I can say that we have to respect that choice. We have to allow the person to exercise that choice, and all that we can do is to create an equitable environment where we provide all the job opportunities for a woman to take on and move ahead. There should not be hurdles just because a person has made a choice to stay back longer on maternity leave.
Right. Thank you, Sharmishta. The next question is for Dhanya. Dhanya, you spoke a little about women at leadership roles. So we have a question from Chitra Sharma, who wants to know what are the resources or learnings that women at leadership roles need, and in what ways can we support them and prepare them for that?
Sure. Thank you for that. Before I respond to that question, I wanted to take a moment to add to what Sharmista was talking about. See, it is true that when women exercise their choice to take their maternity break, there is a near-term impact, right? Data supports that. But I completely validate what Sharmita is saying, that the choice needs to be the mother's. And we have enough successful examples of people who've exercised the break but have really come out on top, right? So for example, our own chairman, Rekha Menon, she at some point in her life took a 7-year career break, 7 years to take care of her children. And here she is, the chairman of Accenture India, right? So it's possible. I think the woman needs to make the decision on how she wants to handle all of that. So Sharmista, thank you for articulating that so beautifully. The question that you want me to respond to is, what do women in leadership roles need, and in what ways could we help prepare them? it's always this question, right? We have this constant dilemma of whether we should fix the woman or fix the environment. And more often than not, we actually choose the way of fixing the woman. So when it comes to women in leadership, I think there are two parts to it. One, every woman, irrespective of how smart she is or how accomplished she is, there is going to be a need for a sponsor. And it's the role of the organization to make sure that a sponsor is available, right? From an individual development standpoint, it is true that it is a man's world, right? Women today, especially at the leadership levels, find themselves in rooms where they're possibly the one woman, or maybe, like, there might be 2 or 3 women in a room full of 20 men, right? So how do you actually handle yourself in that? How do you make sure that you're constantly ahead of the game? And I truly believe that the onus is on the individual to stay completely relevant with their subject, with their knowledge, with their technologies, whatever that makes them superstars of what they do. But from a broader sense of development, I think our women leaders' ability to manage their own personal energies, right? I mean, everybody has the same finite 24 hours, but the demand on a woman, especially who is in the 15 to 20-year career experience, is much broader than what the professional demand is. I mean, she has to make sure she's available to her clients and to her organization, but also to her family and her children, and the people that she gives care to. So how does she actually maximize her performance using the same 24 hours without burning out, right? And therefore, to me, when I think about what do our women leaders need, they need a strong sponsor who's able to create the space and the visibility for them. They need inputs on how they can manage their own personal energies to sustain their high performance. And third, for themselves, they need to stay on top of their game always, with reference to their knowledge and their skills. So those would be the 3 things that I can summarize.
Thank you, Danya. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot. Our next question is to Seema. Seema, we often see that there's a lot of unconscious biasness at workplace, and this is true specifically towards manufacturing companies or supply chain companies. How do you think we can tackle that?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Once again, before I respond, I want to add a little bit, my thought to the question that you offered, Danya, and then it like back to the question around bias, right? Unconscious bias. While all of these owners are, to some degree mentioned on the women, on the organization, I think it's extremely important, to continue to get into contracting conversations with family. So now typically when we're talking about women in leadership, there's a stage that's prior to that, which is, women in management or let's say in mid-careers, right? I mean, may not be at the leadership level, maybe at a level that's lower, right? Now, typically for most women, by the time they reach that age, some of the demands of, marriage and early child care and stuff like that are probably long past. Kids are probably already growing up, if you have any, and your marriage hopefully is settled into, wherever it needs to settle into, right? But I think it's extremely important to take on support from the extended family, from the spouse, and to actually, in fact, not just use that to push, make sure that you have balancing act right between how you're spending time at home, how you're spending time at work. But also, I think it's extremely important for all of us to continue to build role modeling homes for the next generation that's looking up to us, right? Irrespective of whether that next generation is boys and what are the responsibilities we are taking on versus our spouses, and what are the responsibilities we're giving the boys and girls, right, in our family as well, right? So I just wanted to make mention of, the fact that there's a societal influence, and it's up to us to continue to change that. It's slow and steady, probably, and may take time, but, it's something to kind of make sure that, society also supports all of these changes, right? Now, coming back in terms of bias, right? It's right. So when I actually first joined, and by the way, I've not been with Coke for a very long period of time, right? It's been, once again, in parallel with our DNI head joining. I joined in Jan 2017 after almost 2 decades in the tech or high-tech industry, right? I actually asked our DNI head to conduct a routine audit of, all practices, all policies, all processes, right? From a diversity lens. interestingly enough, she found that our recruitment form actually asked the question I didn't even believe when she first told me, right, that this question was there saying, what gender do you want this person to be hired at, right, for this particular role. So this was a form that hiring managers used to fill. And it said male only, female only, or either is okay. And guess what was filled in most of the forms, right? For the most part, it was male only. Right, so we said, why is this even there? In fact, we killed it almost on an immediate basis the minute we discovered this. And so for us it was about something as basic as that, right? In terms of practices, there's a lot of unconscious bias training that's available out there in industry, and we're ensuring that whether it's leaders, whether it's our managers, HR team itself, right, continues to experience all of that. There's also the concept of micro inequities training. I don't know if all organizations are equally aware of those, and if not, I encourage you to find out about that particular concept. So while there's unconscious bias, there's also micro inequities. And when I say micro inequities, what I'm basically talking about is little things that you can do which basically make someone feel more included or less included. Like, for example, in this call, right, if I end up saying Anya all the time, Sharmisha is going to start feeling somewhere, maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, right? That, probably I'm kind of ignoring her for some reason, right? Or vice versa. Or, I live close to, let's say, a particular team member of mine, and on a Monday, right, if that team member happens to come in to other team members saying, hey, I ended up in Seema's house for this, or, Seema and I are sharing a ride, or, whatever. Those little things, right, can start creating who do I go to lunch with, who do I talk to in a meeting, whom do I constantly give assignments. All of those different things can create micro inequities, and it's extremely important because it's in the concept of inclusion and what inclusive behavior is, right? It's obviously ensuring that there's unconscious bias training. I think the other thing is also as leaders and as role models ourselves, whenever we see instances of that, right, that we start speaking up. So just as an example, today morning, I'm sure I became unpopular in my family WhatsApp group. My older cousin, right, she ended up forwarding EJP propaganda, or maybe RSS or some Hindu group, right, propaganda on WhatsApp, which basically, in my mind at least, it seemed to kind of incite communal disharmony of some sort, right? And I could have just kept quiet in the interest of keeping good relations, right, with my cousin and with my extended family. But I said I can't, keep quiet, right? I mean, it actually feels awkward and shameful if you actually end up keeping quiet on this, right? And I actually had to say, hey, I'm sorry to point this out, but I think it's better that, for this reason, right? These kinds of things are not forwarded or shared, or, I mean, obviously everybody is entitled to their private views, but that's not something that you want on a family forum or chat forum or whatever, right? So I think every time, everywhere, you see these kinds of things. It may not be in the space of diversity, it could be in any space for that matter, right? How many times are we taking a stand, right? Very often when I go, for example, to a leadership meeting, if I have a junior male colleague accompanying me, quite often the assumption is that he's probably the head and I'm probably just accompanying him, right? So it's quite often, even today, right? And this is typically the conferences I'm attending for the most part are HR conferences, right? People assume that the woman will be more junior and the guy in the suit, right, is going to be more senior for whatever reason. Of course, after a certain age, everybody starts looking aged. That's a different story. But, it's a gender bias that's beginning to kind of creep in, right? So it's once again a long journey. I think it's training. It's continued role modeling. It's continuing to set an expectation, right, for the next generation. I think it's a combination of all of that.
Thanks, Seema. Very rightly said. I think it's very important to start, teaching the next generation and the young boys and girls. You're very right. A related question to that, Seema. This is from Neville, and he's asking, as a woman leader, how do you balance a competitive career and your personal commitments, and how do you prioritize?
So, to be honest, I don't balance. I use my mom and my mom-in-law very effectively. Right? So, I don't know, mom-in-law wanted me to be outside the house and out of her head. But she was actually very, very happy, for me to be going out there and working. And she was like, don't worry, I'll manage the house, I'll manage the kids, and, I'll do whatever. And if at all she needs a break, right, I ask my mom to come home, because without that, for me, it's very hard, right, to figure out, is it vegetables or it's something else that the household kind of requires. Good news is, as I said, it's a question of 5 years, it's a question of 10 years, past that the kids grow up. I have 2 daughters, and my older daughter is in college now. And she actually is able to articulate her thoughts better than the younger one who's still in high school. And she actually calls me a role model. And so on particular days when for example, today I'm taking this call from Bombay, right? So basically, if the job requires, you need to be wherever you need to be, right? You need to be working long hours. You need to be competing with the best out there, which includes your male colleagues, and so on and so forth, right? So I think my family at least has been very lucky, has been extremely supportive. And I guess my only advice to all the female members out here, right, is if that choice is still there, please make that choice, not on the basis of, let's say, looks or money or, whatever, right, how popular is somebody in a party environment. But make that choice on the basis of, is that person, right, whoever your future partner is going to be, is he or she truly, truly supportive of you in every single sense of the word, right? Does he want to encourage you, see you for what you are, who you are, and, want you to become even more, right? And is constantly going to encourage you in no matter what endeavor you want to make on. By the way, if that choice has already been made, obviously tough luck, but you can still learn how to have contracting conversations, not just, by the way, with your spouse and your extended family, but also with the manager. When you take downtime, by the way, we talked a lot about women going off track, right, from a career standpoint, when it's time for marriage, relocation, kids, all of those, or elder kind of needs, right? I think so one is obviously contracting with family and trying to negotiate some amount of balancing of those kinds of roles. But the other is also, once you're past that, right, when you say, okay, now it's time for me to get back, I no longer have those constraints. How many of us go to our managers and say, hey, that's past, right? From this year onwards, I want to be in full gear, right? I mean, tell me what's your most challenging or complex assignment out of the top 3 or top 5 things you're trying to do this year. Do you even know, by the way, what are the top 3 or 5 things that are the most difficult or challenging in front of your manager? Have you asked that question? And are you saying, I want to support you with one of those? And are you willing to do what it takes, right, to be the best on your team? So I think one of the other speakers alluded to the fact that, the woman has to be on top of her game. I would say it doesn't matter whether it's a male or female. If you want to be the one who's due for that promotion, you've got to fight for that, right, by being the best on the team.
Thank you, Seema. Those are very interesting and thought-provoking points. Our next question is to Sharmishta. Sharmishta, what do you think are some of the measures that can be taken to bridge the gender pay gap?
Okay, so the gender pay gap issue, we have been looking at it, and what we feel is it's not really the pay parity issue between two people in the same role. What the issues are not really about the compensation or about performance ratings. We have not at least found issues there. What we have, however, found is that when it comes to career movements, more often than not, if two people are starting together, then we have seen that the men move ahead faster, either in getting better opportunities, more strategic initiatives, or even a role movement. And if looked in that lens, then of course there is a gender pay parity issue, right? You started together in the same level, and somebody ends up, because for whatever reason, getting paid more than the other person. And this issue, I think, can be resolved if we resolve some of the points I alluded earlier, and that I think Dhanya also talked about as to what we need to do to remain in the game. There are energy that you have, that as a woman we need to channelize appropriately. Sometimes something take priority, sometimes the family takes priority, but at other times work will take priority. So I think all of us who are here, we know that at times we have left a child, ask the child to go to sleep on his or her own, to take food on their own, because we are taking a call at night, or we are not at home at all, right? So there are some of these steps. The other things I strongly believe is that we need to build relationships and networks within the organization. I think it's extremely important that we market our product better in terms of the work that we do, showcase it better, build networks so that our work gets appreciated and we get better work. And if we get better work, I think pay is just a consequence of that.
Thank you, Shanushka. That is very right. Dhanya will bring you in. From a role perspective, this is from Chitra Sharma. She wants to know, are most of the challenges internal or are they external? From a lady's role perspective.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So the challenges to inclusion are everywhere, right? Just to talk about just gender pay parity. It's such a big topic at this point in time. Is it largely fueled by only women's ability to negotiate and land herself in the right role, or is it driven by how her worth is determined through the lens of the unconscious bias that people carry with, right? And I think that it is both internal and external. There's a role that the organization needs to play. There's a role that people need to play, both. From an organization lens, when you think about equality and parity and pay parity in particular, I think there is much to be done in terms of how we're constantly calibrating ourselves, looking at the data to see, are we bringing in people at the right levels? When promotions happen, are we promoting at the right scales? How we are actually very quickly equalizing what we might have inherited from the external world, right? More often than not, organizations themselves don't discriminate where the starting point is. But what ends up happening is when you're hiring a lateral, the person could be coming at a much lesser pay scale than what you might have been offering for that particular career level. So I think that there is a role that the organization can play in holding itself accountable to how it can equalize this gap very quickly. And from a broader challenges perspective externally, we were recently at one conference and a question was asked saying, how many men here, this was an external conference no less, and the question was asked from how many men in the room actually were supportive of their wives being working professionals. 4 people's hand went up in a room of 100. 4 people, right? And that's the society that we are in today, despite all the noise that is being made about equality. So one of the biggest levers that is today under-leveraged is how are we making men co-partners in this journey. It cannot be just a by woman, for woman, organizational-led effort versus saying, how can every man in the room believe that equality actually accelerates everyone's progress and not just, the woman's progress, right? How do you help them break the mindset that it is a zero-sum game, which means that if a woman gets promoted, then a man can't get promoted. Now, those notions need to be broken down, which then says, okay, in the broader society, what are we teaching our sons and daughters? Are we teaching them that it's okay to do housework for the men, or are we still, protecting the boys from the quote unquote what you would call as domesticated things, right? Do the fathers in the house, are they seen doing the laundry? Are they seen doing, the dishes when the need arises, or are they just seen as, okay, I'll just go retire because I have an early morning flight to catch, and the mother deals with what goes on. So I genuinely think that when we think about the challenges that we inherit from the society, we have a huge role to play to say, how can we convert our men leaders to actually believe that they have a very strong positive role to play over here, and make them believe that they need to be part of that. So, making them men as advocates of the gender journey, right? So I think that this is a very, very under-leveraged lever across the industry.
Right, Dhanya. Dhanya, you also spoke about a woman having to take breaks at various stages of her work because of personal commitments. So we've spoken a lot about how mothers can come back, new mothers can come back. But in case women have taken a break for other reasons, are there some programs that can help them get back to work again?
See, all the programs, whether you call it career reboot programs or second careers that many organizations run today, they are targeted towards women who've taken a break, right? Now, what they have done with the break determines how successful their re-entry is. So in the sense, a woman might have taken a break, let's say, for a caregiving responsibility, an ailing parent or a sibling, doesn't matter. But what has that person done during that space that has continued to keep that person relevant when they're doing their re-entry? So it's not so much about whether the person took the break because of a child or for studies or for any other reason. I mean, for traveling, I mean, people take breaks for all sorts of reasons, right? So the reason for the break is actually not so critical as much as it is what they have done with that break. What are they able to demonstrate as learnings from that break, and how they actually capitalize on that, which determines their re-entry.
Right. Thanks, Tanya. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. I think we are up on time, but thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. NHRD has some more programs that are coming for the International Women's Day week, and I will just show that on my screen in a minute. So we have the Femme Phenomena program, which is also coming up. Please plan to join some of these. There is women networking and women mentoring, etc., which are also planned in the coming days. We can be reached at these IDs: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can also email us at reachus.nhrd@gmail.com. With that, we will end this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye.